Welcome to Stories of Hope. I'm Christine Hotchkiss. Each week, I bring you stories that will educate you, inspire you, and give you hope. I want to take and acknowledge my studio sponsor, the Motivated Mind Group, your global creative agency located right here in downtown Chandler, as well as today's episode sponsor is HK Photo Smiles. That would be Holly. Over 20 years experience. She delivers headshots and branding photos that work for you when you leave the room. They also preserve your legacy with family photos, capturing memories for a lifetime. Today, my guest is Ms. Juan Te Daily. She's been an Arizona resident for over 20 years, relocated from California to provide her two sons with a better education and quality of life. Juan Te is a veteran, thank you.
You're welcome.
An author, a mental health advocate, and a certified life coach with a bachelor's in science degree in criminal justice. She's the founder of today's spotlighted nonprofit organization, Dsquared Homes for the Homeless, where she's also supporting the mental health challenges with residential assistance, the homeless with hygiene bags, and the youth here in Maricopa County. But we'll get into the details on that one. Please help me welcome my guest today, Juan Te Daily.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for having me.
Yes.
I'm excited to be here finally.
Welcome to my new platform and studio.
This is beautiful.
Isn't
this is beautiful.
it? We started out on Zoom. Who hasn't done a Zoom interview? So thank you for doing this again. That way there's more of an exposure for people to understand more about what you do and what I do.
Yes, yes.
So now, we are all aware of mental health, but we're not educated on mental health. There's assumptions. There's a lot of assumptions. We think if we see someone homeless, they've got issues, or the list goes on, which we're going to go to. Why you founded Dsquared for the homeless, because you're an advocate for the homeless and mental health. So let's start with what inspired you to do this?
So mental illness runs in my family, and I didn't know that. And so I moved out here, it's been about 20 years. And when in around 2009, my son had a psychotic episode. And I had no idea that he had schizophrenia. And the doctor said, well, he'll probably never work again. He was only 20 at the time.
Oh my, that's young.
Yes, and 3 years later, he was working full-time as a mental health counselor. He had his own apartment, his car, he had everything. And that really just alerted me to the fact that the doctors don't know everything. No. Here my son is doing exactly the opposite of what they said that he could do. So that stigma people have, that is something I wanted to kind of break up. Fast forward 6 years, my son lapsed into homelessness over a toxic relationship. We applied for temporary housing, and he was denied over a $40 income shortage.
Shortage, $40.
Yes. So he had just started getting unemployment. His check was $960. It needed to be $1,000.
Oh.
So he lived in Kiwanis Park for a year. Yes, we didn't know it would be that long, and I just assumed because I'm a fighter, okay, I'm going to fight for my son, and I'm going to get, the help he deserves, because again, he still had that diagnosis, and we never received help. And what I realized is that even though we're going through the system with the mental health system, and they're saying independence is the goal, when they become independent, that independence becomes a liability, and they don't receive the help.
I didn't realize that.
Yes, and so at that time, my son lived in the park, and I was really devastated because I'm used to just fighting to get everything. I'm going to work 10 times hard to make it happen. Wasn't happening with my son. So at the time, I decided to start a nonprofit that helped the SMI population, so serious mental illness, and that's depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, when they're working full time, because a lot of people don't realize they work just like us, and they have that temporary setback. I wanted to provide rent to help them so they did not lapse into homelessness. So my GAP program I came up with, it's the Prevention of Homelessness program. So I started that, but while he lived in the park, that was the first time I had conversations with the homeless population. And I am ashamed to say, but it's important to say, that I never paid any attention to the homeless community. Like, I never gave them money, never gave them anything, and really assumed that they made a bad decision, and that's how they ended up there. You know, whether it's drugs or mental illness, like,
There's
everybody thinks that stigma.
Yeah, yeah.
And when my son lived in that park and I started talking to the people there, I mean, I realized that everybody is one crisis away from homelessness. I mean, I met a mom and her daughter that was 18, homeless because the father died. She's a widow, couldn't keep the house. They're living in the park. The daughter's getting up, catching the bus to college, as if she's living in a house, but she's not. I met another gentleman who was working. I met a couple of people who were working, living in the park. They lost housing, and they didn't have any support to help them, you know, when they have that temporary setback. And so at that time, I met, this is the last example, because this is the person that made me change what I was doing in the nonprofit. So I met a woman, she got a job working at Denny's, which is right by Kiwanis Park, while she was homeless, raised some funds, we bought her a bike, we purchased clothing for her, the uniform, and she started working. She didn't have enough money to live, to get into a place, and she died in that park. She died, and I'll never forget it. And I remember thinking, what if I had the money to help the homeless population get into housing? They're working. And so I changed the nonprofit. So we helped the mental health challenge who's working with temporary setbacks. And now we pay the move-in costs and application fees for the homeless community. So, and that's why I started this, along with changing my family tree.
Yeah.
Mental illness is a big deal for me. Before I started this nonprofit, I was actually writing a book, and I wanted to share with families the issues that they will have when they're keeping those secrets, right? So we have those family secrets we don't tell anybody, and because my family didn't tell me, when my son went to court and the judge asked me if mental illness ran in my family, I said no, because I had no idea. So to this day, which is what, 13, 14 years later, my son has never received disability. He's never received a dime from the state. And even though we've appealed like 4 or 5 times, so you can have a diagnosis, because his diagnosis is schizophrenia, but then the state decides if you can, you know, if you are qualified to receive an income. And so the last thing they told us, which was not too long ago, is that his level of disability is not enough for them. It doesn't really qualify.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, there's one thing that I have in my heart, and that is, you just said, everyone could be one
crisis away.
One crisis away, one paycheck away is what I used to hear. It is absolutely one crisis away. Because I've lived that a couple times with my own life, and I don't say it with shame, using the word shame. Everyone should have a place to call home.
Yes.
Everyone should have a sense of belonging. Everyone should have a place where they can put their head down and feel safe. And then when you talk about the things that you couldn't qualify for or didn't know about, and even if you knew Juan Te, how many people are out here that say, I'm that person, but I don't want anyone to know fear of shame.
Right.
The judgment, and then you already talked about the stigmas.
Right.
And that makes it more difficult. So then we're going to lose people living in a park because they were afraid to say, I need help. Or someone that says, I don't know, so you don't qualify.
Right.
And it's a bad cycle. Our system is broken. It's been broken in many different areas.
Yes.
Where there's funding for some areas that you go, huh? And then you have to qualify for other areas, you go, huh?
Well, and then the other thing that really was a shock is that you actually have to be homeless for quite a while before you get some help, right? So,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, you have to be, it's not like you become homeless, you can get help that day. My son, because we had a couple of interviews and they wouldn't help him, and they have like this certain testing that they provide.
Yeah.
So basically, if you're able to still like work and still have your senses about you, they just kind of feel like you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and they're not going to help you. So, yeah.
You know, there's another word that just came to my mind, pride.
Yeah.
I have pride. Who doesn't have pride?
Yeah.
We don't want to say I'm that short from whatever, or I'm, from a breakdown.
Yeah.
Or from a financial crisis, or being homeless, or whatever the list goes on.
Well, now, though, think about it. COVID has shown us what can happen, and how many people lapse into homelessness because of something that was not their fault, just like my son. Had nothing to do with the diagnosis because he didn't have any issues there. He had recovered. But the people that lost their jobs due to COVID, right, a lot of people are homeless because of that. They lost their jobs. They couldn't survive financially. So I'm running into a lot of families, entire families that are working and living from their car.
So I actually stood in front of a student body about a week ago of 833 students total from the hours of 9 to 3 in the afternoon on an assembly just before Thanksgiving break. And I went up there to talk about gratitude. You know me personally about being grateful.
Yes.
Even when I have a tough day, I go, but there's somebody that's got it worse. Or I have this, and I better go back to thinking, at least I got this.
Yes.
And the responses that I got put me into tears on some of these students, and that was, I had students that said, actually a couple that came and set me aside, and I wanted to cry because they were crying, that I touched them in a way they didn't know that I was going to touch them, and I didn't know I was going to touch them this way. And one of them said, I'm grateful to be able to come to school so I can have food, friends, a teacher, because we live in our car. And you just said some different scenarios that we don't know. Someone could be serving you at Denny's and living in their car, but they got to figure out how to get off this cycle or wherever they're at. Maybe it's not a cycle, it's just a down, and they don't want to be in the system, so they're going to do the pride thing. I'm going to do what I can. And I've heard those success stories too, and it's a vicious cycle. It's good to know that there's organizations such as yours that is able to give whatever the amount is and however your program is to be able to assist them. Which brings me into the next thing is the programs. You have programs apart with this as far as how you assist individuals. Can you give us some more information on that?
So for the GAP program, it's not funded by grants, surprisingly. So when I started this nonprofit, I wasn't expecting to receive grants. So I reached out to the community and I asked supporters to donate $10 per month as a recurring donation, because my son only became it's only $40. So I think people think there's always a lot of money required to prevent homelessness, but it's not. So because I've been on my job for 20 years at that time, a lot of people knew me and integrity. So people literally start signing up for those recurring donations. They donate whatever amount they like. So I asked for 10, and some do 10, 20, 50, 100. One of my friends did 200 for quite a bit. And so that's how I pay the rent. And how I work it, because I do have a full-time job, is I go through case managers. So the case managers have clients who are not receiving that assistance through a grant. And so I pay the move-in cost an application fee for that case manager's client. And then that way I don't have to worry about trying to vet them, look at their income. All that is done for me. And so that was a way for me to help before I had transitional housing. Because that's a whole nother monster. I thought I'd have this nonprofit and I'd have this transitional housing. No.
People have a misconception with nonprofits too, and they think that there's all this funding, and there is
for some
research.
Large ones.
I mean, there is resources for helping nonprofits, but if you don't fall under a certain listing that's already been there to get grants, or for someone to understand what your mission is, I'm sorry, that doesn't follow, I can't help you. And I was like, wait a minute. I found this because I did see that there was a need for it. I have my own nonprofit, as you know, and I don't. Mine's unique as well, and I'm still trying to figure out how to get the same thing going, because people don't realize that it is a need because of my personal journey in my life, like you shared with yours. So that's why a lot of these nonprofits, people are like, oh, you're a nonprofit, you probably have money. No,
and I still work a full-time job. I've been on my job for 23 years, and I run a nonprofit. The other program we have, which is the one that I actually started with, is the hygiene program. I started this because when my son lived in the park, I would take him hygiene, pick him up, bring him home on the weekend, take a shower, all that kind of stuff. And I'm looking around at all these people, And I'm like, nobody's bringing them anything. And it seems like something that just makes sense. But like my eyes were just open to a world that I'd never seen before. And so we created the hygiene bag program, and we collect hygiene donations and non-perishable snacks. And the youth actually started off collecting and filling the bags. And I think they did it every 2 weeks. And then for the backpacks that we have, we get sponsors for those. And because when my son was out there, you know, you'll usually see the homeless with a plastic bag from Fry's or something like that. You can't keep anything in there. So wanted to have a backpack that they could just put on their back and keep like their personal things with them. And so our hygiene bag program is now open to the community. So we get together, we fill hygiene bags in the park. I have a lot of sponsors, like Bombas is a big sponsor. They send us 5,000 pairs of socks. Midwest Food Bank is a sponsor. United Healthcare is a sponsor. They sponsored our bags. So they gave me $10,000 this year, last year also. And so we get the hygiene bags and then get some of the donations and fill the bags. And then I will normally go and distribute those in Phoenix, because that's where the larger homeless population is at one time in one place on the Human Service Campus, which is where we're going Saturday.
You are.
That's where we're going.
You just brought in something else, because we are in the same community, and I did meet you through me working at a nonprofit organization, and you came in and gave your pitch about what it was that you were there for and how we could help you. And then I also know the organization you're going to as well, and the people. And it's really a neat community when you have a community of people that you can relate to that are wanting to serve the same mission of helping other people. Which brings me to the collaborations that people can have, not just a collaboration with sponsors being businesses, but then you've got the other nonprofits that if they can't do this in one area, they have all these other areas that you can come together and still serve in one. I love the collaboration that we have here.
And I'm going to mention this other nonprofit that's super cool. So we actually collaborate at Andre House, and they're called Smokin' Hope, and it's a barbecue nonprofit. It's so cool. Oh my gosh, and the barbecue is so good. So we meet at Andre House, and they serve a barbecue meal, like a full meal plate, sit down dinner. And then we distribute the hygiene bags. So Smokin' Hope and we collaborate. This Saturday, I will be giving away socks and clothing. And so I love like collaborating with other nonprofits, because we all do different things. But I really love Smokin' Hope because they're feeding, and the barbecue is, oh my, it's so good.
Might be somebody I have to come and spotlight here.
You should.
Yes. I'm all about making the difference through however I can as a resource.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So you talked about the programs and the community connections. We just talked about that.
Except the youth program.
Oh, yes. Tell me more about the youth program.
Okay, so the youth development program initially worked where I gave scholarships to the seniors in my program, because they actually ran it. They collected the donations. They put the hygiene bag fills together, and it is a ton of work. So I distributed 2 scholarships per year. This last year, Karasi Coulter, our ambassador, she was Phoenix Outstanding Youth of the Year because of her work with D-Squared. She won the Junior Achievement Award. She won a full ride scholarship to Chapel Hill. Yes, if you Google her, Karasi, Karasi Coulter, you will find her, and she talks about D-Squared, and you'll see her going out in the community. Wow. She wrote a proposal when she was 14. And and so she's led the program in Phoenix for the last couple of years and just went off to college. But I decided to change the program this year because I feel like you can letter in academics and you can letter in sports and school, but you cannot letter in service. And so I really feel like we need to get our youth to learn the importance of investing in their community, because they're the future. I mean, when you look outside and you see all these people living on the streets, if our kids don't care about that, that's a problem. So what I did with the program is I changed it, and now youth 14 through 18 can earn a scholarship by working in the community. So they actually volunteer with some of our community partners.
That's beautiful.
They're earning points, And then at the end of that year, 3 of them will receive a scholarship. And so some of my community partners, Si Se Puede, Guadalupe Teen Court, Paz de Cristo, Midwest Food Bank, so they go out and serve. I added a piece about having them write a essay about mental illness and about homelessness, and they can also interview some of the people that we've helped so that they can speak to someone who was homeless and is no longer homeless, who does have a mental illness, to help get rid of that stigma. So that's the youth development program, and since I just started it, it's really new. We do have a few youth, so I'm walking around and doing some kind of presentations at schools. But a long-term goal, and long-term to me is like 3 months, I want to offer this to foster cares and group homes. No children should not have an opportunity to earn a scholarship. College is ridiculous, and that's really how I came up. My other son graduated from ASU, and when he started there, $4,000 a semester, and I was like, that was more than my mortgage. I graduated from Cal State Long Beach. And when I graduated, tuition was $328. And I was like, oh my God, that's such a huge jump. But $4,000, I'm like, if you have a nonprofit, we need to always do something for the youth. So I'm really focusing on pushing that this year. And then I want to work with corporate organizations to help sponsor, to help pay for larger grants. Because the grants now is just money I raise.
So there's 2 parts of what you're saying I wanted to add.
Okay.
And one of them was the kids. You can't letter. You already broke it down. You can't letter for doing service. I do know one program. Now my children are adults.
Okay.
One of the things I know that they've done, because we did it at the nonprofit Fans Across America, that I know you're still, that you still have a partnership or collaboration with. That's how I met you a couple years back. Is the volunteering that they come in. They have so many hours in the school program that they have to fulfill to get money towards their college to be paid.
Okay, they can do that there.
But I think the lettering thing is better, because here's another part to it too. You already said, and we all know, that the kids are our future. We were those kids.
Yes.
Well, so were the people that you just talked about that live in parks.
That's right.
If we could give them a little more information, resources, or involvement that will help them that in their future, that maybe they do have that one moment away from being homeless or whatever the case may be, at least they were involved in their community to go, I remember when I did this. I know how it made me feel. I know what I was able to do for that person and how I watched them transition. I really think that might be a part of something that could be, I don't get to do the school system, but I think it would be a great idea. Because I know when I was going to school, and as you, the elective classes, I don't even think they have elective classes anymore, where you learned how to change a tire, auto, mechanic, you know, wood shop, baking, sewing. Here's another one for you. Ready? Typing.
Yes.
We're like, what's typing? Now you have to use texting. But these are the things that, these were supposed to be the basics for us to be able to go out and do something in the world. Okay, I've learned how to change my tire a couple times. And we already know we don't type a whole lot like we used to you know, with a typewriter. But these essentials that we need to know are the basics of survival. And if we have an understanding in our mind and connect with our heart as to taking the stigma away, as well as educating these kids, because those kids, we already know it's going to be guaranteed that one of these kids is going to have something happen, and they're going to be that one that's in the park. Or they're going to be that success story that gets turned around because of someone like yourself that saw a need. But if we can give it and instill it. But that's just me, you know, thinking logically.
I know, right? What a concept.
Yeah, it's a great concept. Vote for me.
Yes.
You know, I'm just kidding. So I love all of what you just said. So you talked about the programs and the community connection. We've already talked about.
Oh, there's another one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because I forget to talk about it often because it's just kind of blowing up on its own. So for the last couple of years, we have been making homeless sleeping mats out of plastic bags.
I was going to go there next.
And so in the beginning, we would crochet them. And I say that as if I could crochet, and I don't. I'm just the facilitator. I'll drop off the plastic bags. I can drive the car.
I donate a lot of bags all the time for that very cause.
Yes. Okay. And so 3 years ago, when I started that program, I thought the youth would be excited about that, and they could care less. They didn't want to do it. So I reached out on Facebook and asked if any adults wanted to do it. And so at one point, before COVID started, we had 200 people on that on our Plaurin team. And so, because it's something that they could do from home. So they all collected their own bags, they prepped the bags, and then passed it on to the person that crocheted. And then when COVID hit, it became difficult because, a lot of people thought it could live on the bags, and it could for a couple of minutes. And so this year, because there's so many more people that's homeless, I saw an organization making a mat on a loom. And so I saw that and I'm like, that's such a fantastic idea because multiple people can work on a project at one time. And then we could get the mats out faster. So I'm very resourceful. The loom was so big that it wouldn't fit in my car. So I was mad. Yeah, like it was like their loom, like I borrowed it, but it was too big to fit in my car. So I had to have a volunteer go pick it up. And then I had like all these families wanted to, get it and try it, and they were excited, but it was too big. So I asked a volunteer to make it. So now we make the looms. We distribute the looms in schools. So the looms are actually in 5 schools right now. There's 2 in the Chandler Library.
Nice.
And in fact, we're going to have an event at the Chandler Library December 10th from 1 to 3:30. And starting in January, there'll be one night a month, and there'll be a Monday from 4 to 7, where the library will be open for the community to come in and work on the project and help us weave the mats on the loom. So I'm really excited about that because believe it or not, those plastic bags are comfortable. Like if you have to sleep on something, and I guess it's because it's like put together, I wish I had thought to have one in my car, but they're very comfortable. And I came up with that idea because again, when you're in the park, you're sleeping on the ground, on the bench, something like that. So
JuanTe, you know what it also does? And I do this. I'll go to the store and I'll forget my own bag. And they'll say, do you want to put this in a bag? Nope, I'll carry it all out like this because all I'm going to do is take that bag, take everything out, and it's going to go in the landfill. Unless I bring it to you, of course.
Yes.
But that's how many times that people are doing that. It's just from one location to another, and so I love that you're doing that. So thank you.
Yes, and I'm working on, I want to have a project where we actually have a training program. And this is just like a concept came up with about 2 weeks ago where we're actually training developmentally disabled students, youth, homeless, because there's a lot of skills that they can use. And it's really a great project for children with autism. So I'm really excited about that. So kind of expanding that. But for right now, we have the looms in a few schools and we're working on getting them into other libraries as well.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And the students can go in and earn community service hours. But actually a lot of adults come in a lot more than the youth. But the whole purpose is just to get the community working together, and that's my favorite part about that.
The connection.
People are at the connection, coming together, and we're working on this together, even colleges, because we also take our hygiene bags to colleges. I never thought about homeless students in colleges.
I've heard
and
of it.
So I have a collaboration with Chandler Gilbert, and so we take bags there as well. We also train their nursing students on plarning. So they get together, we go there and we train them, and they prep the bags, they weave and make so we've been doing that for a while.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff behind the scenes. No wonder I'm tired. It's like
Right, but you're always in motion and I see you, so I'm grateful for that.
Yes.
Before I ask my final question, is there anything that I didn't, we've already established the different programs, that I didn't add in here or ask? And then where can you be found should someone want to know more about your organization, donations, volunteering, maybe doing some of these mats?
Yes, so some of the things as far as donation is we're on smile.amazon.com. So for those that love to shop, you can go to the smile.amazon.com website, choose Dsquared Homes for the Homeless as your participating charity, and they donate 0.05% to us on a quarterly basis. We're also connected to Fry's, so the Fry's Rewards Program. And if you sign up for that, we also receive a donation quarterly from all the shoppers. And our code is IL29. Let's see, how else can you donate? You can donate on our website, dsquared, 4, homeless.org. And the volunteering, you can email volunteers@dsquaredforhomeless.org. The 4 is the important thing because usually people spell that out, but it's the number. I thought I was being smart, but apparently it confuses a lot of people. Some other things that I really need right now are volunteers to help with marketing and fundraising. We're going into year 4, which I cannot believe. So in April will be 4, and we are really growing a lot. So I can use a lot of volunteers to help behind the scenes. And as you know, I actually want to do a podcast also.
We've talked about it.
My goal is to interview people who were previously homeless and those that have a mental health challenge to really address that stigma piece, because I know several people who used to be homeless and they are no longer. So we also need to provide that hope, which you're so good at doing.
That's what I like to do. I love what I do. I came up with the idea based on my own observation of things and my own walk of life. And I thought to myself, I'm not the only one who's got a story. So I live outside of my own world to see what's going on in someone else. And I mentioned this a little while ago to someone else. I was like, someone says, do you know what it means to stay in your own lane? You know, people like, just stay in your own lane. I was like, yeah, but I bring everyone in my lane.
I like that. I'm bringing them in with me. And we need to do that. We need to do that, especially when it comes to the stigma. And then next year, I really want to focus more on the mental health piece, because one of the things about the youth, which is why I love working with them, is, you know, they're looking on social media and comparing themselves. So social media is a big issue when it comes to depression of our students, the comparison trap. So what I love about my program, self-esteem, is getting them out and away from their phones so that they can do other things with their hands. So I love when they come together and help fill bags and weave and learn about what's happening in the community.
Well, and if you think about it, even if they did still want to stay connected to social media, because that's what the youth do, and we as an adult want to see what's going on, but we don't have to get trapped into what the social media does. Depends on where you're at. That's a perception of where you're at in your life. But it also gives them that sense of, I did something for someone else, and then they can post it, and it becomes a positive now versus watching everyone else do the comparison thing.
Love it.
But it does turn into a positive comparison if you think about it. Because that's like, wait a minute, you're doing that? Well, I can do that too.
It does, but because sometimes I can be a Debbie Downer, the teen suicide rate increased a lot since COVID hit.
Being on the
and
phone
it's almost like and then one of the things you notice also, and I see it when I go out to eat, is a lot of the parents are on their phone and the children are on their phone. And I think it was Compass Christian Church last year, or was it earlier this year, they had a program for teenagers. And it was a mental health summit. And they're going to have it again in February, and it had the parents and the youth in separate rooms so they could talk about the depression, mental health, and all that kind of stuff. So it's a real big thing. So even though we're saying, okay, they're not addicted, even adults are addicted to their cell phones. So we want to help change that, though.
Thank you.
Okay.
So my final question.
Okay.
I always say this to everyone. If there was one question that I could ask to get to know somebody, or my assumption of someone in a good way, of course, it would be this question, and I would have no other question to know what kind of person they are. You ready?
I don't know. I'm saying yes, but I don't know. I'm a little nervous
You're
now.
Yes, okay. It's a safe yes.
Okay.
What message would you like to leave everyone based on your journey?
Ooh, it is really, don't assume you know someone's story that's living outside or has a mental issue, because I will tell you that from the people that I've met, that's not how they ended up out there. Now, whether they ended up on drugs after they were there and then you don't get any help, and you know, what else are you going to do all day, and who really wants to live in that situation? But my son didn't end up that way, and the people that I've met, they didn't end up like that, you know, living homeless. So I would say, you know, don't assume you know someone's story, and talk to them and get to know them, because that's what I did. I assumed, and it just blew my mind to talk to people and see how they became homeless, and none of them became homeless like that. The majority of them, they lost housing and they couldn't get any support, just like my son.
I'm going to assume your son is doing well now.
He's doing good, but I will also add that once he ended up in housing, which I put him in there. I used my retirement money. Then the stigma continued, trying to find a job. Then you have to figure out you have the gap on your resume. So he couldn't even get a job at Fry's, which was crazy because my son's college educated. But you know, you have the gap in the resume, so there we go, those assumptions, what happened, and we don't want to give them a chance. So I can see why the recidivism rate is so high with people returning like to jail, because if you can't get help and you're trying to do the right thing, a lot of people have no choice but to do things that's, you know, against
They don't
the
think
law.
you have credibility.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
or stability.
yeah, so it was hard. His first year year and a half after homelessness was hard, but he's been on a stable job for like the last 7-8 months now. So he's doing well, yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today and educating me as I introduced in my show that that's what you can get, and hope as well.
Yes.
A great program.
Hope.
Yes.
Exactly. Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to finally get to do this.
Thank you again to my studio sponsor, the Motivated Mind Group, your creative agency located right here in downtown Chandler. I also want to thank my episode sponsor, and that is HK Photo Smiles. That would be Holly, over 20 years of experience. She delivers headshots and branding photos that work for you when you leave the room. They also preserve your legacy with family photos, capturing memories for a lifetime. If you have a story you want to share, know someone who has a story, or another nonprofit organization in your community making a difference, please email me to the address of stories@christinehotchkiss.com. Until next time, everyone, I wish you well, and you take care.